Thank you for my listeners to joining into XROM, which is India's first AR/VR/MR podcast. Do kindly subscribe and ring the bell to keep updated on the latest content that we share on a daily basis. So today I have with us Rene Pinnell, who is a producer, director, CEO, and co-founder of Kaleidoscope VR Fund. They bring together top artists and industry leaders to develop fund, license, curate, and distribute XR projects. We need more people like you because I believe this is the future, and what is lacking in this ecosystem is somebody like you who kind of enables the content creators, right? So for my listeners who don't know much about you, can you, in a little brief, start when and where and how you discovered virtual reality, a little bit about Kaleidoscope VR Fund?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on your podcast, and welcome everyone who's listening. I'll try to not make you bored. So we started Kaleidoscope back in 2014. My wife and I founded the company together after we saw some of our friends in San Francisco using the technology to make art. At that point, back in 2014, it was seen as just a gaming thing. And we saw it and said, okay, gaming is interesting. That's a fantastic way to use VR. But why not use it for telling stories? Why not use it for creating art? And we formed Kaleidoscope at first just as a organization to help artists of any medium transition into producing work in VR and AR. But after we formed the company and held a festival, we did one of the first VR film festivals in early 2015, and we traveled all around North, and then rolled to early 2016 in Europe and Asia. Unfortunately, we missed India. But in that process, we met with hundreds and hundreds of really talented artists all around the world. And the thing that we heard over and over again was that their biggest problem was around funding. They could figure out the technology. They loved figuring out the creative challenge. The bit that was beyond most folks was, how on earth am I going to raise money for my project, especially in a very expensive medium like virtual reality, which, the equipment costs a lot of money, and the skills and teams that you need to put together cost a lot of money. So we decided that should be the main focus of our company, is helping artists raise money for new work. And we started to attack that problem through marketplace events. So starting in 2016, we would hold regular marketplace events where we would curate work on a particular topic and then invite industry who we knew were funding projects to that event. So for the artist, it gave them exposure and connections to potential funders, distributors, curators for major festivals. And on the industry side, it saved them time. Right? If you're on the industry side of things and you're looking for projects to support that fit whatever mandate your organization has, it's a lot of energy to just sort through all the different potential projects you could back. So we worked like a filter for them. So it provided value for both sides of the equation. And we were fairly successful in raising money for projects. The first year we were focused on marketplace events. We helped artists raise a little more than $4 million for new work, but it didn't scale. This was something that required a tremendous amount of time and energy and money to pull off on our part. Organizing physical events it's a giant challenge, right? Like, you've got to figure out how to pay for the venue, the food. You have to create an event that provides enough value that people are willing to fly nationally or internationally for it. So it's and then it's just a tremendous amount of energy to organize and execute on that. So we realized early on that while events were a really good tool for helping artists raise money, it was something that couldn't help a very large population. It was a very small, rarefied group of folks that we could help because it was just so manual. So we realized that we needed to build something that was going to be leveraging technology. So the first pass at that was building an online private network for the XR industry. So artists could create project profiles for work they had in development, and industry could join to see these projects, read about them, see their pitch decks, get a sense of their budget, and then communicate with one another on the platform. So that was the first pass, and then in 2018 to 2019, we started to hold events online, just using things like Zoom. And this was obviously before the pandemic, where everyone lives online now doing events. But for us, it was just a way that we could take our core functionality of highlighting certain artists and certain projects and connecting them to industry. We realized, well, let's just cut the big cost center out of events, which is making them physical. Let's just do them online and see how that works. So we did that for a lot of 2019, and that it was still a valuable tool. But when the pandemic actually hit, we felt a huge sense of urgency to do something that was much more direct in terms of getting money into the hands of artists, because events and sort of the networking side of Kaleidoscope, it definitely helped artists raise money, but it was sort of the first step in a number of steps that an artist would have to take to actually close a deal. We would help make that initial connection, but then they would have to continue to pitch their project to that industry person, and then they'd have to negotiate a contract, and raising a large amount of money is just a very long process. We raised $1.5 million roughly for a project called Spheres. That took over a year, right? So when the pandemic hit, we're really financially, we're like, to do something that addresses the other end of the spectrum. Working artists that just need enough cash to get by, to stay creative. So that was when we decided to launch a new product called Kaleidoscope Grants, which are monthly recurring production grants. And initially they're pretty small dollar. They're between $1,000 and $10,000 awarded monthly on different topics. And we spun that up over the course of a couple of months and launched it last month for the first time. So far, that has proven to be really valuable for the artists in our community. It gives them something that will help them focus and sharpen their project materials, because they submit their work to one of these grants. The community is actually the folks who select the winners, and in that process, they give a lot of feedback to the artists who submitted work. So even if you don't win one of the grants, you at least get feedback from the community, as well as make new relationships and new connections that can push your project forward. So we're going to be focused mostly on grants for the foreseeable future. That's going to become what we focus most of our energy on certainly for the rest of the year, because we see a great need for these sort of small grants to keep artists focused on producing work and able to pay their basic bills.
Lovely. How cool is that? Yeah. So I think you're doing a great job, because I guess VR is in such a nascent stage, and there are a lot of people who want to experiment with it, want to build it, but like you said rightfully, it's an expensive technology, right? Not everybody wants to get into it because of that little barrier that you see, and here you're trying to solve the problem. I think it's a great thing. You said you build this. You're doing a tour. You missed India. I wish you come down and visit us, because we're a beautiful place, and I guess Bollywood is big over here, and if you want to drive any technology mass, Bollywood is the way to go. I always keep on saying that. I've got in touch with Facebook, Google, and I said, you hyper local content, and that could be an opening towards, because we have 1.3 billion people, right? And we consume a lot of content. Like cricket is a religion. That's a sports that we are the religion. So is Bollywood. So tell me, this Kaleidoscope grant that you're talking about, is it restricted to only American content creators, or is it open?
No. Our whole community is very global. Only about 30% of our members are based in the United States. The rest are spread out all over the world. Right now, probably somewhere between 4 and 5% of our members are based in India and the sort of surrounding areas. We would love to see that number increase. And our grants are open to anybody that are located anywhere in the world. And we would love to, if there's anyone listening that would like to start a grant, we would love to start a grant specifically focused on Indian artists. So please reach out to me if this is of interest. We will seed new grants with a $500 to $1,000 investment. So if there's anybody out there that is really passionate about supporting the Indian VR ecosystem, please do reach out. And happy to share my email in the show notes.
Lovely, definitely. I mean, I'm going to leave behind the details, and yes, I'm going to reach out to a couple of players over here who are actually invested in the AR/VR space. Like Bahubali was one of the biggest blockbusters out of India. They had done a VR edit. A.R. Rahman, who's a music composer, has also done like a VR film called Le Mask, and there's this guy called Shekhar Kapoor who's directed this Hollywood film called Elizabeth, who's doing something in VR. So Bollywood is now Bollywood is now exploring virtual reality because they do understand that's the future, right? I mean, theaters, which is obviously currently impacted because of COVID. Yeah, and besides that, anyway, the footfalls had been dwindling anyway when it comes to theaters, because I mean, we have OTT platform, we have got content on demand, so that already has been on a decline. So there are some really smart people over here, the smart producers, directors, do understand that the 2D medium is going to die out eventually. What is going to make way? It's going to make way for the 3D medium, the virtual reality, the immersive technology. So they do know that they are exploring and they are getting in touch with people like me and others who are vested in the space, to kind of like grow that nascent ecosystem. India is, like I said, we just kind of exploring this, but like I said, we are a big country, and if we kind of push this forward, it could just grow into a big business. So tell me, how do you think COVID-19 is going to impact content creation, especially virtual reality content creation?
Well, I mean, it's already had a huge impact across every industry, but in the VR AR industry, we sent a survey out to our community, and it was pretty devastating. 74% of the artists had lost the majority of their income. So above 50% of their income they had lost because of the pandemic. So that's, I think everybody is hurting financially right now. But on the bright side, if you can find one, VR usage has gone up considerably. I don't have any specific stats to quote, but anecdotally, I know that the folks in our community are spending much more time in their headsets watching work. And I am confident that the same sort of numbers that you've seen in video game usage probably hold true for VR and AR. So I think this is an interesting moment in that people are looking for ways to escape their current reality because it's pretty bleak and grim. And I do think that overall, that's going to be a boost for the industry. It's sad and dark, but I do think people are going to seek out projects in VR and AR, and I think the headset sales will go up because of the pandemic. I do think it's going to be challenging for businesses that were operating with physical locations. Certainly until there's some long-term solution like a vaccine for the pandemic. I do think location-based centers for VR and AR are good businesses and will probably come back strong on the other side of this pandemic. But right now, I definitely think focusing on work that can be seen in home is a good bet if you're a studio or an artist who's wanting to create work for the medium. I would probably pause any development on location-based experiences and really focus on work that makes sense for the at-home audience. And specifically, I would focus on the Quest. I'm not sure what the adoption rate is in India, but the Quest and whatever future generations of that headset come out, that is the device that will and is getting broad consumer adoption. So I think if you're trying to create something, you really should be focused on that, unless you have a very, very good reason to focus on a tethered headset.
Right. Yeah. So yes, obviously, I mean, it's a no-brainer that untethered VR headsets is the future, and Quest is just the beginning of that. Yeah. Sadly, nobody is looking at India. Not Facebook, not Microsoft, not Google. They don't understand the potential. Possibly, they assuming that India doesn't have the money power, and they still. So I maybe they are right in some ways, but I think that the country is growing, and the economic power of a local, layperson is growing. So, what do you see monetizing for Kaleidoscope VR? What I mean by that is which front? Is it 180 content, 360 content, stereoscopic, monoscopic? Whether it's interactive, what is it that is getting more traction or getting distribution and sale?
Well, so 360 and 180 content, there's a lot of different places you can distribute that work. But the deals that you can make are small dollar. So if you have a project that is 360 or 180, the licensing deals that you can secure are in the thousands of dollars, not and occasionally the tens of thousands. But mostly you're looking at licensing deals that are somewhere between $500 to a couple $1,000 for a non-exclusive license. So if there's a telecommunication company in Korea that's wanting to license a bunch of content, you can maybe license it to them for a couple $1,000 on a non-exclusive basis, and you can hustle and try to piece together some of those. But so I would say if you've got a piece of 360 or 180 content that's high quality, the market value is we'll call it like somewhere around $10,000 USD, provided that it's a high relatively high piece of content, quality piece of content. So that's not a whole lot of money. But if you're producing stuff cheaply and you're wanting to use those mediums to reach a wide audience, 180 and 360 is great because they have the broadest distribution. Like the number of places you can put that content is quite large. The next area that I think is monetizing the best is standalone apps in the traditional store. So like in the Oculus store, or Steam being the two biggest ones. What type of projects do well? It's still heavily indexed on gaming. If Oculus doesn't release sales numbers, Steam doesn't exactly. There's some third-party services that can kind of hint at what sales are likely to be. Gaming is still by far the biggest selling type of content, but that's starting to change. I don't know the sales numbers for Gloomy Eyes, but that's a animated VR film that is being charged. They're charging something for it. I think it's $5, $7, something like that. It's got Colin Farrell as the voice talent, and very high quality animation. I suspect that those types of projects are doing fairly well. So I don't think artists should be discouraged from doing something that's not gaming. They should just know that the audience of people that have headsets at home are still very gaming focused. So if you're trying to produce something that's outside of gaming, just be aware that that's the context for your audience. So that's where I think sales are, and in terms of what you can make from selling a standalone experience in the Oculus store or the Steam store. It's in the tens of thousands, maybe if you're lucky in the hundreds of thousands. very rarely in the millions. There's only a handful of titles that have generated more than $1 million in sales. I think there's maybe like 50 or 60 that have gone over $1 million. With, of course, Beat Saber being the biggest success story. I think that has probably generated maybe 30-40 million by now in sales. So there is money to be made. You just need to be very scrappy. You need to keep your production costs very low, and try to bring them in line with what you can likely make, which is in the thousands, maybe upwards of maybe $20,000 if it's 360 or 180, and in the tens of thousands, maybe a couple $100,000 if you're lucky in the sort of standalone gaming interactive side of stuff.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with Tipatat Chanawasen. He's an investor from the VR fund, and we were having a conversation. He was talking about how virtual reality content at this point in time, like you said, I mean, there's hardly any content which has got $1 million or something like that. What do you think should be done to raise awareness, have larger adoption, so that we are, I mean, going mainstream, it's like a little far-fetched at this point in time. When do you think something like that would happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to look at the few successes you've had, and Beat Saber being the biggest one. So Beat Saber was created by 3 people for not that much money. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was, not a huge amount of money went into making that. And nobody knew that it was going to be as big of a success as it was. But one of the reasons that it was super successful is that they had content that was very engaging for an outsider to watch. So there was a huge number of YouTube videos that people started to post of them playing Beat Saber, because it was just super, I mean, it made them look awesome, basically. So I think that's one strategy for creating a piece of content, project that can grow the audience size, is giving people a very compelling reason to post videos about the work, or of them playing the work. So really thinking through, how does this look from an outsider's perspective of someone watching another person play? So that proved to be one very successful marketing channel for Beat Saber. But I think a more fundamental thing that artists should think about when they're determining what to create is the benchmark needs to be not only as, ordinarily you'd have the benchmark be like, this is good enough for someone to buy. But I think with VR, it needs to be good enough that someone not only buys your experience, but they're so excited to play your project, to experience your work, that they are willing to go buy a headset for it. Because that's really how we get to broad consumer adoption, is that you have to have those killer apps where the content is so compelling that it's not only worth the purchase of the project itself, but worth the $400 plus expense of buying a headset. So as long as I think everybody in the community should have that as the goal in their mind. Make something that's so fucking good that someone's willing to go spend, let's call it $500, whatever your project costs plus the headset on up. And that's a very high benchmark. And most projects will not hit it. But I think it's good to have that at least be the aspirational goal for everybody who's making content right now, because some of those will connect. We will have more Beat Sabers. And that's how we get to mass consumer adoption, is not having just one Beat Saber, but having, 10 and then 100 and, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. You said, I mean, the content has got to be compelling. It's got to push you to go and say, okay, I'm going to put my money, and because the content is so fucking awesome, I'm going to pick up that VR headset, right? So tell me, I mean, what's the membership strength of Kaleidoscope VR Fund, and what do you think? I mean, can you share some really awesome content which you think is going to redefine the future of narrative?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, so the artists in our community right now are mostly, the majority of our community is folks that are coming more from cinema tradition and the art world. So it's a little bit at a somewhat disadvantage for those breakout big hits, again, because gaming has been the stuff that the largest number of consumers are interested in. But in terms of projects that are on our platform right now that I'm super excited about in development, I think is worth talking about. One, it's interesting because it's location based. It's a virtual reality experience by an artist named Blanca Lee. She's a very successful choreographer and dancer in France, and she's doing a very interesting project where she'll have 15 people come into a physical location, and they'll all don headsets as well as full body trackers. And it's, I don't know the exact runtime, but I think it's like an hour or two where you enter this whole fantasy world of going to like an extravagant ball where there's like ballroom dancing and there's intrigue and mystery that happens. But it's kind of like going for like an immersive theater entertainment experience, but it's all in VR. I think that's a genre that will be quite successful. Again, it's in the location-based stuff, so it's I think it's going to be a bit tricky to do a project like that in the next 12 to 18 months. But I do think that is going to be an area that projects can have a big impact and make a lot of money if you do really thoughtful, interesting, sort of immersive theater experiences that are heightened by virtual reality. Another project that's coming out soon, I think this summer, is called Rhythm of the Universe, Ionia. And it's a story-driven game that's all based around music. It's built in Unreal Engine. It looks fantastic. The visuals are phenomenal. And it fully engages with the fun and magic of creating music. So I really believe in that project quite a bit. There's another project called How is the Water, where you get to be a dolphin. It has a very fun mechanic where the locomotion is actually your headset sort of bobbing up and down as though you're swimming like a dolphin. And it's a really brilliant project, and I think we'll do quite well. There's another work called Stay Alive, My Son, which is on the linear narrative side of VR. It was all shot using Depth Kit. So it's volumetrically captured artists, and it's quite ambitious with its scale. And it's in post production now and will be released sometime this year. And I think that's going to be an interesting benchmark. Point more than anything is that you never know. You don't know which project is going to be big. So I think you just, whether you're an artist or somebody in the industry who's thinking about backing projects is just, back, support, create the work that resonates with you. And if you do that enough, some of those projects will break through. So the most important thing is to just stay creative, stay focused on either making work yourself or supporting others who are making work. And know that it's a long game. It's not wise to, think you're going to put all your energy into one project and your whole success or failure is going to rest on that. Make one project, put it out in the world, see how it does, learn, make the next one, and do that same process over and over again. And eventually, you'll find success.
You need to keep at it. Back in early 2016, we built our own 18 camera rig, and I directed, produced India's first stereoscopic VR horror short film. It's called Crackle. It's done the festival circuit. It's won the best VR experience at Miami Fear Fest and some Russian. So virtual reality, it's in such a nascent stage, but what it can do is so cool. We just kind of like exploring those things, those tools like volumetric, haptic feedbacks and things like that, where I think maybe possibly in like another 10 years, the way we are growing with this technology, I'm sure the lines of what is real and what is virtual will start getting blurred, and we're living in some really, really exciting times. So do you see more innovative monetizing or distribution opportunities falling in, which you would like to share to other content creators or distributors?
Well, in terms of what I'm most excited about is, I think there's two things, I guess. One is the power of art of any kind, whether it's a book or a movie or a game, is that you get to imagine a different world than the one you live in. A novel is kind of the perfect form of this, in that it's typically, a whole story universe coming from one person's mind. But they're never this world. It's always a sort of a reflection of this world. And I think that process of imagining different worlds is really valuable, because we get to see those worlds, experience them for a little bit, and then decide what parts of them, if any, we like and would want to live in the real world. So I hope with virtual reality and this whole process of world creation, which every project is engaged with on some level, I hope that'll become a tool that we can use to make this world that we live in the real world better. So I that's my hope for virtual reality as a medium, is that it'll be just like all art, but hopefully even more effective at suggesting alternate ways to live and engage and cooperate with one another. Because it's, I think in so many ways the world is heading in very dark and dangerous directions, and I think it doesn't need to. I think we have all the tools and resources we need to make life on this planet for everyone, something that is dignified, and something that provides great emotional resonance. I think we're all in a very stressed out, unhappy place in general. And I think that symptom is expressed in, the impending ecological collapse that we're facing. So I hope that VR can help, again, show us alternative paths that we can take. So that's one thing that excites me about the medium. The other thing that excites me about it is that it is a new medium, and when you have a new medium, you have new businesses that spring up around it. And when you have a new industry like this, it's an opportunity to reimagine how you do business at a fundamental level. I think the current entertainment industry and the art world, in a broader sense, doesn't fairly compensate the creators, the writers, the directors, the artists, the technicians, the craftspeople, all the folks whose hands actually go into making something. I don't think our current industries, I think those folks generate way more value than they're able to capture. And I think that's wrong. And I think it's something that we can fix. And I hope that we can do that in VR and AR and in the immersive industry in general. I hope we can imagine new ways of doing business that allow artists to capture a much greater percentage of the value that they do create with their work. So those are two things that excite me. And then in terms of new business models, I don't know. I think, there's a lot of people that are experimenting with lots of different ways to release work. But I don't have enough data or like good examples of ones that have clearly succeeded for any given strategy. There's just so many different variables that go into a project being successful, and it's still not clear to me what elements are real sort of ground truths in terms of best practices or best business models. So I think the only thing I am 100% certain of is try to do your work for the least amount of money possible. uh, and try to have as many of the skills required to produce work housed in your own brain. So, small teams, all the way to teams of one, I think are really good. I think that's the best strategy. If you're an artist or a studio, is try to do a lot. Try to rely on the skills you already have. Try to grow your skills, and stay focused. The one metric that you should pay attention to and care about is how often am I releasing new work. And if you're waiting around for months or years trying to get enough support to do some giant grandiose project, I think you're doing it wrong. I think you should focus on what can I create today? What can I release tomorrow? And then just keep repeating that process. So that's the one strategy that I'm 100% sure of, and encourage everyone to adopt.
Right. I think beautifully put. I guess, it's these small incremental steps. You don't need to push too much into the future. I mean, you can push into the future if you got billions of dollars parked at your bank account. And you also said creative, the art industry. I think music and movies or creative storytelling, I think it's revolutionized our world. I mean, that's one thing which is keeping the world sane. My background has been to the creative industry. I've started as a musician. I've played for a rock band for 20 odd years. I used to compose for Bollywood feature films and advertising. So I understand the joys and pains of creating content, and then being disregarded or underpaid and things like that. And I guess that needs to be changed, because I mean, we're living in tough times, and what keeps it, a little calm is these music and movies, which has and always will keep us calm and, push mankind into a better path forward. Now, with technology, there are people who are building like photorealistic content, right? And then there is this other side. Because of COVID-19, we're talking about building virtual production, virtual content. Does Hollywood need to wake up and smell the coffee and say that there are indie studios, indie content creators who are doing really, really good stuff at like the most minimalistic price? Where do you see the future of content creation going?
Well, I don't. Again, I don't know where it's going to go, but I know where I want it to go, which is so there's a couple of different things. One is obviously distribution is much easier, right? Anybody can distribute anything globally now for no cost, and then the price of production is also going down. Tools like Unity are basically free. If you're actually doing live action capture of some kind, cameras, the price has just dropped crazy amounts in the last 2 decades. So the cost of production will continue to fall until it basically reaches zero for most, or for some things, and reasonable for others. So what all of that seems to indicate for me is that the last thing that is still a challenge is sort of the marketing and discovery side, right? That's still where Hollywood has a big leg up on small studios, is how do you make sure everyone knows about your work? But I think that's got to be something that technology will make a big impact in, and already has. So my hope is that we will see a Cambrian explosion of small studios that can produce work that can reach huge audiences. And making something that is a blockbuster or a big hit by whatever metric you want to use, that's still going to be a hard thing to do, and most studios won't. But what I hope is that they won't have to. I hope that we will. I hope that the media landscape is such that a small studio can have a small, passionate audience that cares about the type of work that studio makes, and that the market forces between those two things are enough that the studio can pay their employees and continue producing new work for that small but passionate audience. So that's the future I hope will, and actively working towards enabling is lots and lots and lots of small studios of 5 to 10 people that produce really beautiful work for very specific communities of fans. And that's a trend that's been going on for a while, but I want to see it accelerate and become, especially on the business side, a much more accessible proposition for artists to create a small studio and to have it be economically viable, where it's not just about passion projects, but actually producing work that they can pay their bills from. That's what I hope.
Lovely, lovely. On that note, Rene, it was a complete pleasure talking to you. Thank you for sharing your insights. Any last views to our listeners and your future roadmap? What do you?
Please become a part of the Kaleidoscope community. Doesn't cost anything to join, and there's a lot of value you can get out of being a part of the network without spending any money. So please do consider taking a few minutes if you're in the VR or AR industry, or if you're not. With the launch of Kaleidoscope Grants, we're actually expanding beyond just VR and AR to any form of art. So if you're any creative, we would love to have you in our community. We're very welcoming and very supportive, and we'll look forward to meeting you.
Lovely. Thank you, Rene. Wish you the very best. And I guess, the future of narrative or storytelling is being born in the form of VR. We are just exploring that space. We've not even, I see a world where we will be designing, like how we have these holiday packages. There'll be these holiday packages or anything that you desire will we be able to create in VR. So in that note, to my listeners, if you like what you see, please press the subscribe button, joining us. And thank you. I really appreciate this. Yeah, thank you.